Welcome to a new episode of the Weekly Wizard. And today I'm joined by Trevor, or Dr. Ethereum, as many of you might know him, from RabbitHole. Yeah, welcome to the show.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so first of all, the first questions I always like to ask is like, how the fuck did you get into this weird space, which is crypto in 2022? So when was kind of your first touch point with crypto?
Yeah, always it's always the first question, and it's funny, like you almost feel obligated to talk about like your first experience in crypto, right? When you meet someone or introduce yourself. And so yeah, my sort of origin story here is I would say 2017 was the first time I really started to be interested in crypto. I think the Ethereum ecosystem and just this idea of sort of an open blockchain, like many other people, was sort of what drew my interest in. At first, I had just graduated college. I was working um, in the entertainment industry at the time, and it was a good job. But I had a lot of free time in between tasks, and so I found myself like constantly researching, listening to podcasts, chatting with a few buddies about it. Uh, and yeah, that was my first foray into it. Of course, I knew about Bitcoin before that, but really only paid attention when like the prices would spike, and you'd be like, what is this? Um, and so yeah, a few years went by, and like I stayed really close to the space. I was working as both an analyst as well as sort of doing product and strategy and business development for a film distributor, actually. So it was really a bit of a startup culture, you could say. So I wore a lot of hats and did a lot of different things, but that's really where I first started to explore being interested in data. I used to follow the Reddit channel Data is Beautiful, which just has really cool visualizations. Yeah, and I just would geek out on that on my own. I really didn't know like much of like what went into it, or like where I would be today when I was looking at data at the time. But it was fun stuff to look at. Um, and so from there, I actually decided to double down on finance. So my line to crypto is not a very straight path. I went and worked in the skiing industry actually as a financial analyst for a couple of years, and it was a pretty serious corporate culture, I would say, very bureaucratic. Um, your thoughts and opinions were kind of buried amongst a lot of noise, and so you're doing a lot of accounting, not a lot of creative analysis, I would say. And I think like part of me was lacking that like fulfillment and being creative. And at my previous job, I had built a lot of dashboards. And so, if you combine sort of all these experiences with following along in crypto and kind of what was exploding there at the time, that's sort of how I got into on-chain analytics. And a buddy of mine, who was actually a friend that got me into crypto in the first place, he showed me what Dune was, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like, sort of free service that I can just look at all of the blockchain data and create dashboards. Like, this is kind of what I thought I wanted to do. Didn't really know, much about SQL. I had used it a couple times in the past, but like, I mean, I think yourself and I chatted a lot when I first got into it, and I was asking you the stupidest questions, but important ones to ask for me and my understanding. And so, yeah, is what it is. And I sort of picked up SQL like over the next couple months, and started, I would say, looking for ways to make some sort of income off of it. I was still in the skiing industry at the time. Uh, and so just after work was when I was really being able to dive in. But I remember, yeah, you and I had a lot of conversations about how there were some serious financial opportunities, as well as ways that you can, like, if you really like this, to make this a full-time gig. So I started to explore the freelance side of it, just as like a side hustle. And yeah, ended up entering some grant competitions for Uniswap and Compound, um, and just doing like sort of ad hoc freelance, building dashboards for those guys. And then that was sort of my first taste into like, making crypto as an income, actually earning tokens, which I thought was pretty cool at the time. It was a lot better than me losing money trying to trade. And so, yeah, from there, I started to just get really hungry, and really wanted to get away from the corporate lifestyle. And so I started to look for more grant programs. I found Synthetics, applied for a grant with them, ended up, being a dune monkey on that side, building some dashboards for them, which has actually turned into a pretty great ongoing relationship. As well as I actually worked for Chainlink too as a research consultant. And I was mainly researching a single project with their business intelligence team, doing things that had never really been done before, which I didn't understand fully at the time. But I remember asking my boss at the time, how should we go about this? Like, is this the right approach? And he was like, dude, nobody's ever done this before. Like, go ahead and be scrappy. And that's kind of when the light bulb went off my head that, like, I am a pretty scrappy analyst, I would say. And so, Google is my best friend when it comes to learning new things. And he was like, just use it to your full extent, do whatever it takes to like get to the end result. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. So at that time I was working 3 jobs, just really hustling, trying to get out of my corporate job in a smoother fashion. I didn't want to be unemployed, especially here in the US with healthcare. It can get a little rocky, and expensive at times too. So I was trying to just do everything I could. Of course, working that many hours really takes a toll on your personal well-being. So you could only do it for a short period of time. And that's when I met Brian Flynn at RabbitHole, who's our founder, and actually just applied, through traditional means, through a job application, had some good chats with him, talked on Twitter a couple times, and then, found myself as data lead for RabbitHole. And so that's kind of been my whole journey from start to finish there. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a wild ride and it hasn't been a straight line, but it's been a lot of fun because everything we're doing here is totally brand new. And so every day you kind of just feel like a pioneer. Not every day is successful, but I find success in just learning new things. And so that's been sort of motivating for me. Are you still there? I don't know. Can't see you. Okay, we lost Boxer. He'll be back soon, though.
Why am I Thomas now?
All right, you're back, but you are under a new name.
This is pretty hilarious. Yeah, sorry about that. I think my internet provider just decided to give me a hard time. Um, yeah, I guess we'll just cut this in post production. Sorry for anyone who's watching live. I think you were just finished with your personal crypto journey segment, though. What I kind of so before you started picking up SQL, I guess you were only working in like Excel and like BI tools. Is that kind of the case?
Yeah, exactly. I think I was primarily working in like Power BI, Tableau, and a lot of Excel, building like a ton of raw financial models from scratch. And so, yeah, I mean, you start to learn a lot about Excel, but at the same time, without macros, you really can't take that too far. You can't do too much automation without also like breaking your hardware, because a lot of the machines that we were working off were not very powerful too. So I was like, definitely trying to look for new ways to, yeah, to kind of expand those tools. And I think that's where Dune really struck a chord with me, was that like it is a browser based application, but you guys have, of course, your own servers that you're constantly upgrading in the background. So it kind of helps where like you don't have to run that off of your own hardware.
Yeah, some of these analysis that people are doing, it's like, yeah, give me the average like block gas price over the last 6 months. It's like, yeah, your like whatever they were giving you, your Lenovo PowerBook or however they're called, like it would just explode.
Yeah, select all from traces.
Yeah, yeah,
I have a few of those running every
yeah,
2 hours.
always a good measure. Yeah, and the thing with Excel macros is also, it's like you build all these beautiful macros and then you're like, yeah, I'm going. And it's like, yeah, all that work is pretty much down the drain because nobody can even maintain those macros. So yeah. But yeah, interesting. What do you think were the transferable skills that you could take from kind of that role to then working with like SQL and Web3 data, since that is kind of different, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that like the way that you pull the data is of course different, working with SQL. But I think there was a lot of transferable skills in the financial analytics I was doing, where like the way you pull the different data, but the way you're looking at it is more or less the same. And it's really just expanding your scope into like what these protocols mean. And so you take, different like margin calculations that you may have been doing in the past and like growth formulas and things like that, and you start to just apply that to this new way of looking at data. And of course, pulling in data through SQL is not something that's new. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really database management at that point. And I think that's what's so cool about blockchains, and what drew me in was that, a lot of the companies I was working at, our data was a total mess. Some of the decoded contracts we have here are like incredibly clean, right? And I mean, we were pretty much trading back different Excel files. And so like you would build this beautiful model only to find out that like your inputs were totally wrong, but you don't actually know where the issue was. And so after a couple of years of doing that, you start to get a little frustrated because you can't really make as much of an impact, put your name and your work on the line, only to find out after the fact that it's, slightly off, which can totally change your business direction. And yeah, working with blockchain data is like, your outputs may be wrong. The way you calculate things may be incorrect based off your understanding. That needs to evolve. But you almost always know that like the data you're working with is at least accurate.
Yeah.
Or you can check back to the chain, right, and verify.
Yeah. You can always go to Etherscan and kind of like, is this actually what happened in that transaction? And
Exactly.
very rarely does Dune report anything wrong. I think, yeah, there's some like very isolated incidents, but in general that shouldn't happen. Yeah, it's we're just analyzing the outputs of a computer, and thankfully that computer is like very reliable and just putting out the same data all the time. So yeah, it makes it very easy and really a blessing coming from a background like yours, I would guess, to work with that data. I've had to like deal with a lot of user input before, That was just horrible, man. Like, oh my god, like the amount of Excel macros I wrote to kind of input and recognize like mistaken user inputs. It was insanity.
Yeah,
Um,
you end up having these like really massive cells in Excel that are like basically just cleaning data.
yeah,
And you end up spending like over 80% of your time just cleaning data. And so by the end of the day, you're like, I'm too exhausted to even do, proper analysis. Like, here's a chart.
yeah,
I'm going home, that kind of thing.
yeah. So let's be grateful for the blockchain. What was harder to pick up? The kind of understanding the EVM and kind of like even understanding like trying to understand what you're looking at, or more the SQL part.
Yeah, I think that like probably in the first month, the sequel part was fairly complex for me because it was more or less a new concept. Um, I had taken one of those like SQL boot camps years prior,
Hmm.
but of course, like I wasn't using it every day, so I forgot it. Um, the good part about SQL is like once you learn the basic structure, it really just becomes Googling different ways to build that. It's kind of like a puzzle, and so I think that like it was slow at first, and then I really just picked it up, and I started to see it like a lot more clearly. I think one day it just clicked for me. Um, the EVM aspect was also pretty confusing. It still is to this day. I mean, I think I spend countless hours on Etherscan, comparing things back and forth, and really just exploring that way. Um, but yeah, I mean, understanding all the relationships there can be pretty complex. I think like really early on, I had asked you if Dune had like ERDs, like entity relationship diagrams, to basically like explore the schemas because I didn't understand how like these tables connected and how they were supposed to work. Um, but yeah, I mean, without Etherscan, like I think my SQL and my Dune skills would be like far behind because you really are able to take a trial and error approach, and I think that's also how I learn best, very hands on, very much like let me fail first, learn from my mistakes, and then just kind of keep going. And it's great to be able to just like run a query, maybe be 90% confident in it, take the transaction hash, go to Etherscan, look at the logs, and then comparing back and forth, and all of a sudden you realize like, oh yeah, I made this mistake, or no, this is spot on, that's exactly like what I was trying to pull.
Yeah, yeah, very much. Yeah, kind of test hypothesis like driven approach. Like that seems to work best in Dune. I always do the same as well, where I'm just like, I know nothing, then I like start writing queries, and then it's like, oh yeah, this is something, and then like you iterate on that approach, and you're like, eventually you get to a data set where you're actually like, oh, now I can make my analysis, and then you're just like going to this other aspect of like, yeah, like once SQL clicks, it kind of like it makes total sense, and then you're like googling like how do I calculate a median over the last like 50 whatever
Right.
entries in a row or like in a column or something, and yeah, like combining those things where just like very like iterative and like very test driven approach where you can just like you can fail, like June doesn't charge you money per query or anything, and like they run in a reasonable amount of time if you know how to properly limit your queries, and yeah, it becomes very easy.
Right,
So yeah.
exactly. And I would say like the ability to fork or to just view other queries is so incredibly helpful too. I mean, a lot of these protocols are truly, copies of each other or iterations on each other, right? Where someone builds a building block and then all of a sudden they're, a few versions later, those pieces still kind of exist in another protocol. And so being able to, if you wanted to calculate like the median revenue for an exchange, you can find someone else that had actually written that query and kind of extract it, break it down bit by bit, and rewrite it in your own words. And then all of a sudden you realize like, oh, I actually do understand what's going on here. Uh, so that's been a pretty great like growth hack, I would say, for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Social learning is OP, I always say, where it's like
Yes.
you can just look at the other people's stuff and learn. Yeah, cool. So what does your day to day like life at RabbitHole look like today?
Yeah, so of course, another small startup. We have a great team, so I would say that my day to day lately has been much more focused on data. I think for a while I was doing a lot of product, some business development, things like that. Really just trying to help out wherever I could. But in the last 3 or 4 months, have really been able to dive into user research, which has definitely opened my mind into different trends that are going on today in crypto. And so, yeah, my day to day at RabbitHole really, you know, it, it involves both working towards strategic priorities that kind of push the whole business forward, as well as, um, ad hoc analytics, answering product questions, building tools that the community can use, building tools that we can use internally to track data. A lot of like 0 to 1 foundational stuff so far at this point. But yeah, Dune has made that incredibly easy. The export feature as well has been great, where we actually have at RabbitHole an off-chain database, because we aren't yet a protocol just quite, and so we don't have RabbitHole contracts, writing to the blockchain. And so for that, we have to actually combine on-chain and off-chain data in order to paint a full picture of like who our users may be, what kind of activities going on with our product, and things like that. So I still do use Excel from time to time, but I'm slowly migrating away to more database management and using tools like Redash or Mode, which I know Dune actually I think was a fork of Redash initially, or maybe fork's not the right word,
Yeah,
but
well, we use the so Redash is just a library, and we were kind of using this library initially in our first version of the product to just like have the visualization aspect
right.
ready. Man, it's so strange that I'm here as Thomas. I don't know how to change it.
I think you can. There's got to be an edit name somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, I will.
It's your new handle.
Yeah, I'm Anoning again today.
Yeah.
New pseudonym.
Right.
Yeah, well, it is what it is now. Yeah, now I lost my track. So yeah, you'll be happy about the Dune API, I think. If you're already using kind of other online services, and yeah, then like a Dune API where you can just like plug the query results, or like plug certain tables into your actual product suite, that it will change your life.
Yeah, I'm very excited for that. I'm also like taking that hard path and trying to learn some Python right now for data science, and just starting to work with APIs as well. So once Dune has it, I think that'll sort of spark a new path for me to go down.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll also have to learn quite a bit once we get there. It's gonna be an interesting journey. We can have endless Discord conversations again. Of like, how
Right,
does this work?
exactly. Can't wait.
Yeah, cool. So we haven't really talked about what RabbitHole does at all yet. So if you can give us kind of your elevator pitch, or whatever, a short introduction to RabbitHole.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say like RabbitHole's primary goal right now is really to become the best place to progress through Web3. And so that's really talking about all like the entire user journey, starting from the first time that you purchase crypto to when you first engage on chain, all the way down to when you find work and become a real contributor to a DAO or to a company in any sort, which really is intended to leverage your on-chain resume of sorts. And of course, there are a number of protocols that are currently, exploring verified credentials and things like that. I think what RabbitHole really wants to solidify themselves as is a place for finding signal in the noise. I would say, really using curation to do so, because yeah, I mean, there's so many different actions you take on chain that it's hard to kind of sum those up into value, and then to take those credentials or assets and to do something with them. And so that's kind of what we're exploring right now. So yeah, we recently launched 3 new skills: intro to DAO, NFTs, and DeFi, which is really where the market's at right now, I would say, from an education standpoint. Really just starting to hit on like those core pillars of crypto and Web3. Eventually, we will, add on more skills, allow users to progress in some way. And yeah, I mean, the next iteration of this is really verified credentials as well, and so you'll be able to mint your skills as NFTs and then use those to find work in crypto, hopefully, and so yeah, we still do quests. I think RabbitHole has been known for kind of inspiring and inciting a lot of on-chain actions in other protocols through what we call quests, which are basically, a series of different tasks that users get rewarded for participating in. And so, yeah, we do those as well, sort of as a bootstrapping mechanism to get users involved and engaged in other protocols as well as RabbitHole.
Yeah, I see. Do you guys have partnered with any centralized exchange or something to like make that first like buying crypto thing, or how does that work?
Yeah, we haven't yet. Right now, we're pretty hyper focused, I would say, on exploring credentials themselves. But we do want to take a step back and really focus on top of funnel, which is helping users onboard into crypto. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there for the entire industry, actually. We tend to take a perspective that people know what you're talking about when you first show them a crypto application, or when you say, "Oh, go trade on a DEX, a decentralized exchange rather than Coinbase." And in my experience, at least, I've found that there's a lot of very obvious questions that we just sort of pass over. And UI and user experience, you could say, is a part of the problem, but I think even more so, it really is about education. Because if you think about it, like the first time that any of us got into crypto, we really didn't know what was what, and a lot of this didn't exist. So for us, it's been more of a smoother journey because we learn about a new feature, a new protocol, we try it out, and it starts to make sense. But if you're just jumping in today in April of 2022, man, there is a lot of noise out there. And yeah, to decipher between what a centralized exchange is and why you would use that over some sort of self-custody application, it really doesn't click and it doesn't make any sense. So I think what we'd like to focus on is really education becoming the go-to place for, like, you have a friend that wants to get into crypto, doesn't really know what to do. It's like, go to RabbitHole. You can get your 0 to 1 sort of education here, and then eventually prove out what you've done on chain in order to kind of take yourself to the next level.
Yeah, I see. So you guys have been doing this through what you called quests, and could you give us a short primer on what, like, a few examples of what quests have been?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most recent ones we've done was actually staking on Lido. And so the quest is essentially, stake ETH through Lido to earn rewards on your tokens. And so, with that quest, you would effectively navigate to RabbitHole. You would start the task of staking on Lido. That would take you to Lido's protocol, actually. You'd connect your wallet as normal, engage in the app there, stake your ETH, and then you would return to RabbitHole, and you'd be able to redeem that task and that quest for some sort of reward, whether that's an NFT or tokens themselves.
Yeah, I see. And you guys are probably using the graph or any other data indexer to kind of check back if that user actually has done that transaction, right?
Yep, we use a mix of the graph, various APIs, and yeah, eventually would love to have our own indexer, fully deployed. because there's a lot of data I would say that needs to sort of be customized for our purposes. Where like the graph could be fairly general purpose depending on like who created the subgraph itself. As well as there's also maintenance issues, right? Like if you don't own the underlying subgraph or the API itself, and it goes down, like you're kind of just at the mercy of the protocol in order to figure it out.
I see. So your whole kind of mission and approach is be the one education center in Web3 where I can just send like my grandma, my little brother, or even a colleague who's not that familiar with Web3, and then kind of take them by the hand and like walk them through this weird space and this wild space of Web3 hopefully without getting wrecked or losing all their money or spending too much in gas, and learning something along the way. Is that kind of a good way to put it?
Yeah, totally. And I think like, there are always risks along with, working on chain, especially right now and using new protocols. And so I think we really try to focus on different values as a company, some of those being like financial security. Is the blockchain going to be around? I would say we are blockchain network agnostic. We really are open to sort of engaging and incentivizing any new network that comes on, any protocol, but we want to also make sure that it's safe, battle tested, and that like any money you put, towards that, it's something that you'll be able to get back one day. And of course, there are things other than DeFi to explore too, with NFTs and such. So like, I think right now the majority of our activities on Ethereum mainnet. But when you start to boil down the tasks themselves, they truly just make sense right now on mainnet. If we have an intro to NFT skill, of course, there's NFTs on other platforms, other networks, but most of the volume right now is on Ethereum, right? So we want users to get the most out of their experience.
Yeah, I see. So one side of this is pretty much like the quests. It's like one workflow, and then you said you're also like kind of have launched in like education center. Is that kind of correct? So like how to work inside of a DAO and how to navigate DeFi. Is that correct understanding?
Yeah, so that's something that we're currently building out right now. We definitely are starting to double down on sort of educational content. Right now we have guides that are directly associated with every single task you do on RabbitHole. So if the task was to vote on a proposal on Snapshot, then you would actually be able to see like an associated guide that walks you through the whole process with pictures, videos, different descriptions of every step that you're taking. So really just taking someone all the way from like opening up Snapshot for the first time to voting on a proposal and actually understanding what it means. And so the three skills that we have right now are focused on NFTs, DeFi, and DAOs. And there's a few underlying tasks within each of those skills that kind of connect the dots for you. So like our DeFi skill is really a journey through taking ETH and maximizing your yield on ETH in a safe manner, right? So I believe that skill you start with staking ETH on Lido. You then take that staked ETH and you lend it on Aave. You now have collateral on Aave to borrow against. So you can go and borrow USDC against that Aave or against that staked ETH. And then with that USDC, you can then go and LP that in Uniswap. And so you're taking like this initial ETH and going through this whole journey to eventually earn through Lido, earn through Aave, and earn through Uniswap.
Okay, interesting. That for sure. Like for somebody who's new to this, that's a whole like scary journey to do all of that.
Right.
And kind of having somebody to just grab your hand and be like, hey, like let me actually try this out. That's pretty cool. And you guys must have like, you obviously like, how do I say this? Like it's not that far off from what you've done so far. It's just like stringing a bunch of things together. And like I can see how that would be a a very nice experience. And then you were also you were kind of alluding to like making on-chain credentials and kind of getting people ready for jobs in Web3. And I guess that's something that they will happen more down the line, huh?
Yeah, I think that credentials themselves they're currently being talked about a lot on Twitter, right? Like you see a lot of mentions of verifiable credentials. Not really sure what those are. Maybe non-transferable or soul-bound NFTs.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, what we're trying to do is basically take these skills and allow you to wrap them into a credential. And this credential is essentially an asset that you can verify the actions with through your on-chain transactions. And that asset can be used in a number of ways to sort of integrate into other protocols or DAOs. For instance, like if you were trying to hire someone that had DeFi experience, but you weren't really sure how to prove out their DeFi experience, you can say like, we're requiring the intro to DeFi skill credential in order for you to apply to this job. And all of a sudden, that they actually have gone through the journey of, maximizing yield on their ETH. And like, in order to do that, you have to use 3 different protocols. You have to have a decent understanding. You have to at least probably, read the guide to understand exactly what you're doing and what the risks associated are, things like that. So it kind of qualifies the user for you. And then since it's verifiable, yeah, you can go back to the chain, pull their address, check exactly what transactions they've committed, and then just prove out that they own that. Or you can check if they own the NFT itself.
Yeah, I see. So you guys actually do mint NFTs to people, kind of?
Yeah, it's something that we're building out right now.
Okay.
Yeah,
I see. Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, that space is a bit crowded right now, I would say. There's like a lot of different people trying to do this. But obviously, you guys you have quite a head start there. I usually send people to RabbitHole, and I'm just like, go through their like guides, go through their quests. Even though you can't claim money anymore, it's a great introduction.
Exactly. I think one of the issues that we started to see, especially as I started to dive into user research, was that there are just so many people in this space really trying to farm protocols. And so I would say that like Web3 and crypto really has like this retention dilemma where unless there's dedicated incentives, users are not sticking around. Now, there's plenty of reasons that may be the case. There may be complexities around it. Some of the actions themselves may not be very repeatable. You're not going to go and take a huge loan on Aave every single day of your life. That's really maybe reserved for once or twice a year, if that. But also, yeah, people are looking to really just to farm airdrops. They're looking to just gain short-term value, and they're chasing that. And so you see like liquidity mining programs that spring up, huge spikes in user activity or wallet activity, you can say. And then all of a sudden the liquidity mining dries up, and that protocol barely sees more than 100 users a month after that point.
Yeah.
And it's a huge problem, I think, in crypto. And it's definitely one that we're trying to solve for by inspiring, I would say, improved participation, where we're actually finding more mission aligned users. Of course, like the journey between being sort of a mercenary and speculating and being mission aligned and contributing to a protocol, those users aren't really, it's not binary, right? Like you're not really one or the other. I think when everyone gets into crypto, you're first interested because it could potentially be a great way to make money. And, as you start to learn about these protocols and sort of the mission that we're all trying to accomplish here, you start to realize that there are other opportunities too. And yes, making money is one of the goals. And so you're going to have multiple wallets. You're probably going to test out a bunch of protocols, hope you get that airdrop, but you're also going to be contributing to a DAO and like doing something productive in the space. And so while there are like very unique cohorts, I would say, someone who's a farmer, a casual user, a power user or a whale. You can also be sort of in multiple categories at once.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. You guys must have done quite some internal, like, you guys must be like a hotspot for like knowing how like DeFi adoption and like user adoption in general is going. So can you? I think you've built some great dashboards around like different quests on Dune. So maybe we can look through a few of those. And I think
Yeah,
you
we-
need to
we
reshare your
definitely
screen after I got drugged earlier.
Can you see it now?
Yep. Let's go in there.
All right, great. Yeah. So since I've been talking about Lido as our most recent quest that we did, we'll start with this Lido dashboard. One of the ways I use Dune at RabbitHole is to kind of prove out a thesis, you could say, where in this case we had a quest that specifically targeted 2,500 addresses and required them to stake a minimum of 0.02 Ether with Lido. And so we kind of wanted to see, exactly what the trend was for the protocol, as well as what kind of impact the quest had on those trends. And so, yeah, right off the bat here, you can see like we had incentivized 98% of new participants here. And so what that essentially means is that that's 98% of the 2,500 that had never used Lido before. So that's actually, over 2,000 new users essentially for Lido. Now, of course, there's gray areas, right? There could be addresses that people spin up to do this, to participate and earn the reward. We do take anti-Sybil measures with our quest specifically. One of the ways we do that is with Bright ID. Bright ID is an anti-Sybil tool where you actually have to verify yourself as a unique human being and associate that with your address in order to like use their platform. And so by requiring Bright ID in our quests, we can effectively say that like or reduce the amount of bots coming through here. Because to do Bright ID, you actually have to get on a video chat.
Okay.
And
But
like have another person.
Do they require like to show the passport, or how does that actually?
No, with Bright ID, you just have to sort of show your face, talk to a group, and then you start to verify each other through like social interactions. And so, yeah, you could do it through video chat. Like there's there's an app you download with a QR code, and you kind of start to scan each other's QR codes. And yeah, through doing that, you kind of build this network of unique users. There's also proof of humanity, which we don't currently use right now. However, I think for that one, you do have to sort of KYC by like showing your passport and your face, or some sort of identification alongside.
Yeah, I mean, like the idea of Bright ID sounds pretty good, but I could just like jump on those calls like 20 times, no?
Yeah, so within the app, there's like a unique identifier associated with your application and your address. And so there are ways, I believe, to Sybil that as well. But it greatly reduces the number of people because the friction it's really high, right? Like it takes time, it takes energy, and it requires you to sort of dox yourself in order to participate. And of course, I wouldn't say that's like necessarily the best long-term solution. But all roads really do lead to Sybil right now. And I think as long as you're giving away free money, it's always going to be an issue. So you have to come up with a solution to do it. Like Optimism's airdrop that they just released. If you actually look at the docs and the data behind how they filtered for users, you can see they went to quite a far extent in effectively making sure that they weren't being farmed. And it's not going to be perfect, but there were certain things like repetitive usage that you had to engage in, and different pillars that may not be financially viable for someone to try to work the system on. And so by extracting those users, you can start to narrow down like how many of these users may actually be unique.
Yeah. Yeah. And they were also kind of the combination factors were weighted really heavily. So if you had like 3 or 4 or 5 tasks, then you would actually like get quite a big airdrop. And like all of these tasks like alone were quite limited. So even if somebody tried to bot like doing things on the optimism network, by like not doing any of these multiplicators or like combinators, you'd still like the bot farmers are still they haven't like I don't think it was worth it for them pretty much.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
pretty interesting. Yeah, so yeah, I can see how the friction of Bright ID probably like. What's your best guess? Like 95% actual real users?
Yeah, I would say probably a little lower, maybe like 85%.
Okay.
Yeah, there's definitely ways to get around it, but they're fairly complex, and I think Bright ID is constantly improving their security in their application as well. And yeah, I mean, there's like I said, there's always going to be some sort of civil, but for a protocol like Lido or someone else, especially the smaller protocols, to be able to receive 90% plus new users that we can with 85 or 90% confidence verify are actually unique people. It really does help create some network effects. And yeah, I mean, so like on this Lido quest, you can see that we required 0.02 ETH to deposit, but there's actually a handful of users, I think over 70% that actually did more than the minimum deposit, right? So that's another positive for Lido. It gets people engaged and interested, seeing how they can earn on their ETH. We had over 225 ETH staked during the quest period. And then, yeah, as you start to look at trends, you can see this like massive spike here, right? And that's exactly when we, that was February 11th. So yeah, right in the smack dab in the middle of when we launched our quest.
Interesting.
And so, I mean, like part of what I was talking about with like retention is that sure, we can drive this huge spike in usage. However, it's tough because after that point, you really have to rely on users like building good habits in order to start actually engaging with the protocol again.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Have you kind of done an analysis if some of these people actually came back and staked more ETH?
Yeah, so that's going to be this query right here, which is how many users deposited post-quest. So yeah, like once the quest period ends, did they come back again and deposit? So you can see, 5% did here. I would say I usually analyze that number on most quests that we do, and it typically is anywhere from like 2 to 15%. So I actually think 5% is a pretty solid number there to have people come back, because like I said, with lending on Aave, right, you're not going to lend every single day of your life. You're probably also not going to go back and stake ETH every day of your life. You may like do that in big chunks or something, right?
I totally see what you're saying. Yeah, interesting. I think this table in the middle where it's like somebody went through the quest and just casually staked like 150K. I think that's pretty wild.
It is.
Just
it is,
right? Let me like try to figure this out. It's like
yeah, I think what you end up pulling in, some whales as well, and so they go, oh, this is a reason for me to use Lido. I've been wanting to use it for a while. I have 200 ETH or something, right? And they're like, let me just stake 25% of that. And you can see they did 4 deposits too, so that means they came back again. They're like, actually, let me add some more. It
is really interesting insight actually. I guess like it actually made like I like seeing that it's like there's this person who only has 1 deposit and he has deposited like 86K. That is a bit scary because he basically went like on the first try, like just let me like YOLO all of this in, and the other ones are like let's test with like 1 ether or like 0.02 ether, and then like it actually works, so like let's add more. Very very interesting.
Right, he didn't even do the test transaction.
He's just like
0.1.
I trust RabbitHole. Like this will be all right.
Yes.
Interesting.
Verify, don't trust.
Yeah. So, how much did people earn for doing this quest?
I believe it was shoot, I don't remember the exact amount off the top of my head, but it was somewhere between like 20 and 40 US dollars.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I would say like doing quests is not necessarily a sustainable way of earning an income, but it is kind of an incentive to
Yeah.
get people to participate and try out new things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of a very gated approach. In the end. So, you basically like you can fail. Of course, you can always fail. But yeah, especially for people who are like not familiar with the space, this seems like a very nice experience to like guide them through. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
very
definitely
cool.
safer, right? Because you're almost being reimbursed for your gas costs if the
Yeah.
quest is on Ethereum
Yep.
mainnet. And
Yep.
then if we do a quest on Polygon or some like Optimism or something, where the fees are really low and you still are getting $20, and for some people that actually can be pretty impactful.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that. Do you have a like dashboard where you kind of look at the overall metrics of RabbitHole, or have you only built dashboards for like one quest and the other and the other?
Yeah, so most of our data at RabbitHole from an application standpoint is off chain. So I
Mm-hmm.
have various ways to look at that.
Yeah.
But I did also build a couple of these like user insight dashboards, which
Mm-hmm.
effectively allow me to sample a set of users,
Mm-hmm.
and then by cross-referencing that, I can look at all sorts of different on-chain activity associated with these users, whether that's bridging, DEX usage, NFT usage, as well as like general transaction history, um, and seeing exactly what contracts they engage in. So I can take RabbitHole users and see like, in the last 24 hours, there's been 137 ENS transactions, probably scooping up all those 3 and 4 digit domains.
Yeah. Um, yeah, this is really cool. You're basically using blockchain data to make user analysis, which, in my opinion, is very underutilized. And I will definitely check out the code of this dashboard because that seems like it could very much be just generalized. I hope they're not private. um, but yeah, this is really cool. So you guys are pretty much making the assumption that like an address is actually a static thing. So a lot of the time, I think in the space we kind of assume that people like switch wallets like every few weeks, and like a wallet is just like whatever. But like from my experience in like having like surfed this data for like close to like 1.5 years now, it actually is that like people never change wallets. It's just too cumbersome. And you're kind of
Yeah,
using that like property to like do user analysis and then like kind of feed that feedback back into your product teams, I guess.
yeah, exactly. And I think that was a good point about multiple wallets. I think that there's a number of reasons why people have multiple wallets, but it's less about users switching back and forth and doing the same actions with them, and more about them building like a unique identity based off of that wallet. Whether it could be a private or public identity, but for the most part, I think everyone sort of has a different use case for their wallets. You have your vault wallets, you have your degen wallet, you may have your NFT wallet, you may have one that you connect um, to any app, right? And you're
The
like,
YOLO
I
wallet.
may, yeah, your YOLO wallet, exactly. You'd never keep more than like couple hundred bucks for gas on there,
Yep.
maybe some garbage NFTs or something, right? But you either have those kind of users, or you have people that are just spinning up new wallets with code, essentially botting for various speculation purposes. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, taking that as an assumption, of course, you're not going to know exactly who these users are, but you can start to see trends in their usage. You can identify which wallets are NFT whales, which wallets are consistent traders, which ones are just sort of casually maybe drifting across the blockchain, trying out new protocols, which ones are farming. And Dune makes it really easy to do all this. So, like, I think most of these queries right here are actually using like the Ethereum contracts table. and sort of just cross-referencing, usage with that. And so again, not a perfect picture, but you can already see like that like OpenSea and 0x and Uniswap are some of the top protocols for this set of users.
Yeah. What do you think does 0x do in there? Is that people using Matcha?
Yeah, that was my assumption, was either Matcha or some other, like maybe the contracts being picked up from another underlying protocol.
Yeah. Yeah, 0x powers a lot of like infrastructure, so you never know. I think the Coinbase NFT marketplace also runs on 0x. So if this is the last 24 hours, this could actually be the Coinbase NFT marketplace, even though I've not heard of anyone posting about it, or I don't know if it's like it launched a week ago or so in beta, and I don't know if it's live even.
Yeah, that was my concern with it too, was that like they did such a limited launch. I don't know exactly how many users have access to it, but I think it's more like some of the larger accounts may. And so I think volumes are fairly low, but it's not necessarily reflective of like how much their marketplace will be used, because it needs to be like super widespread, I think, to get usage there.
Yeah, they need to get all the like those people who are like locked on a centralized exchange, who don't want to like take self custody and everything, and kind of can execute all of that workflow inside of Coinbase using the 0x. That certainly sounds like an interesting idea. Even though I don't even know if they require you to log in with a wallet to trade on there. We'll see.
I think they have both a custody and self-custody option, or at least start building that out. So you can either use your like KYC Coinbase account, or you can use MetaMask or something else.
That's actually powerful. I'm really looking forward to diving into that data once they actually pick up. It will be interesting to see if they actually kind of shadow move the NFT from like one centralized user to another, or if they like even emit an event on chain for that. It would be very sad if they wouldn't. We'll see. Different conversation.
Yeah, that is a good point though. I don't know how much of like the centralized activity will be picked up. So it could be that like volumes are understated when you're looking at the on-chain data.
Yeah. It's gonna be interesting. This is certainly like a new world. If you look at like FTX or like whoever else, like centralized exchanges, like they are just like, no, like we are just like shifting this in our journal database. We don't care about on-chain data, right. Which is pretty sad. Maybe an API one day we can actually like pull that data, but we don't know. We'll have to see. What kind of like, what are the insights that your team kind of pulled out of this dashboard, if you can kind of share that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say like, not necessarily from this dashboard specifically, from just looking at on-chain data associated with our users. That's really where I started to drill into the different cohorts that addresses sort of belong to. At least now with the market, you really have like 4 or 5 distinct cohorts, all the way from farmers to casual users, to something that we've been calling minnows, which are sort of users that are just getting started with their accounts. Then you of course have power users, people who are fully engaged, possibly contributing, definitely participating in your protocol, to whales who just have the power to drive entire markets based off of their like volume and usage.
Yep.
And so we've done a solid mix of analysis, looking at both like RabbitHole application data, seeing what their activity is there, as well as looking at how they engage on chain. And that's where we start to identify, are they a heavy DEX user? Do they bridge to other chains? Do they only use Ethereum as, maybe for like a couple protocols, or only for NFTs, and then most of their engagements on something like Optimism? Those are all sort of the questions we're asking right now. Really trying to understand who our users are, what their motivations are, and then how we can build the best protocol for, taking users from 0 to 1, and then from that point into actually contributing and getting a job, all with data. So I mean, I think that there is a lot of underlying assumptions that we take here, and so we always run the risk of like looking at a user who we may believe fits one persona, but actually they fit another.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that's why having sample sets of data, testing your hypothesis over and over with different sets of users is really important to iterate on.
Interesting. So you've done this with multiple sets of addresses as well.
Yep, exactly. And so you start to see, you can start to extrapolate trends where, like, of course, one sample is going to be entirely different from another. But you do start to see that, like, the majority of users are, likely seeking, lower gas fees. They're engaging in blue chip protocols rather than a lot of sort of like new non-battle tested ones. And so by doing that, we can start to drill into like what users are coming into RabbitHole today. And then, like, do we want to continue to target those users? Do we want to incentivize others? At what point in their journey is our product matching up with like the user persona?
Wow. Yeah, that's magical. I've you guys are like the first ones where I hear and see of this, like actually doing that kind of, like, usually on Dune we do like a lot of like competitive analysis between like different projects, but you guys are actually like, let me like research my users and like how could I design their experience better. And if it's like, I don't know, like out of a project perspective, what immediately comes to mind is like if I'm Uniswap or if I'm SushiSwap and like I see that somebody has used me in the past but is no longer using me, like what are they using today? Like what might that product offer? I think that's a very, very much underutilized category of like data analysis in DeFi in general. Like what are users doing? And only, it's really, it's unheard of. You're a pioneer.
that it's definitely for us at RabbitHole, I think one of the most exciting parts about on-chain data is like, in the traditional world, data is so closed and gated that you really can't paint a good picture of a user unless you ask them to complete a survey. And even then, you don't know if they're telling the truth or not, and you can't really associate it with like a unique ID, right? And this unique ID that we can associate with is actually an address that works across every single EVM blockchain. And so, you can take it pretty far.
Yeah. That's revolutionary stuff right here. I love to see it. I think like as the Dune community, we could basically make this easier by like having better tags and like basically like developing whole algorithms. So like you don't have to do this on your own, and like the other guys, like I think there's a lot of opportunity there to make really cool things happen. So yeah, it's certainly exciting that you are already embarking on that journey without the proper infrastructure to support it, I guess. Or like Dune is actually the perfect infrastructure to embark on this journey, but you're kind of pioneering this way of doing user analysis. And in the traditional world, you can only like, I think what people a lot of times do is like buy like anonymized data sets. So you get all that data, but it's like, I can't really tie this to one person, and then I don't really know like how true my assumptions are. So this is really cool.
That's a good point too. Like when you, like a social media survey or something, for instance, can tell you that like 20% of your users are, doing X action, but you don't really know how to tie that into like a specific cohort or something.
Exactly. Or like credit card data or something like that, where you're like, these people have bought at my place and they've also bought at Amazon, but you're like, come on, like this doesn't really help me with anything.
Yeah, you don't know if the same guy that bought at Amazon is now like moving on to a different marketplace, right? And like, I'm sure Amazon would love to know that data too.
Yeah, wow. This opens up a whole new playing field. My mind is blown right now. Like I think I've talked to people about this before, but seeing this in action, and your dashboard really like does a pretty good job of this. This is pretty cool stuff. I think if there's anyone from a product team listening, they're probably like writing queries after this podcast. Very
There'll be a lot
interesting.
Of forks to this one.
Yeah. Cool. I don't know. We've already kind of RabbitHole, great stuff that you guys are doing. So maybe we can kind of transition into general Web3 data talk and what we've already pretty much done here. Yeah, and what do you think makes this data so special, and what are you especially excited about? Maybe we've already talked about this now, so it's like, is there any additional aspects that you're really excited about?
Yeah, I think like right now is probably one of the best times to be in data. Certainly in, exploring Web3 and crypto, it's like the data is so available, and providers like Dune, and others are really doing a great job of cleaning that data. So earlier I think we touched on how most of your time in a traditional sense was really just scrubbing data, and it's incredibly exhausting. Staring at spreadsheets all day, trying to do so. But now we really get to focus on the actual insights and extracting that. So I think it was it's definitely been a journey for myself to kind of switch that mindset in my head of like, I don't need to spend all this time, down in the trenches, scrubbing the data when I could actually just be extrapolating like real tangible sort of call to actions from what I'm seeing on chain. And so, yeah, I mean, that's been really fun. I think that honestly, just learning blockchain and new protocols through something like Dune has been really cool too, because there's probably no better way to learn than like actually looking at the contracts, and you end up figuring things out that you never would have ever put effort into, right? And like if you're curious at all about a certain query or how something's calculated, you can see the raw inputs, check those back on Etherscan, see exactly how they're being written to the blockchain, or even go and test out the protocol yourself to find, to back into those answers. I actually do that a lot at RabbitHole, where if I'm looking for a specific answer to a question, but I'm not really sure how to get the output, I'll go and just do the action myself. And so, yeah, if I want to know like what is the proper contract for lending on Compound, and how does this filter down to the token level or something, right? I'll go and just try out a couple different transactions, of course, with my test wallet, and then I'll just take those transactions in Etherscan and just break them down and then translate them to SQL and Dune.
Yeah, yeah, that's always how, like, it's kind of insane how like well informed you have to be as an analyst, kind of on a contextual level, of like, I guess you especially like working with all of these different protocols, you kind of need to know like how does this actually work, like on a like smart contract system level. Like you don't need to know like what each, like you kind of need to know like conceptually like what a smart contract does, but it's like how do these like all of these contracts interact with each other, and like what happens when I like trigger that transaction and stuff. That is certainly a hard part about like being a Web3 analyst, but it also gives you like very deep insights into like how all of this works, and you're like, oh yeah, this is just a fork of like this thing I've seen like 3 months ago, and that like kind of gives you like additional insights into what that team is building. So yeah, I can fully subscribe to that. That it's certainly like a very good way to learn about the space, and also like very exciting kind of space to be in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I covered everything. I hope there was some questions in the chat from our concurrent 5 viewers.
New record.
Not the best time of day today, I think. Is Thomas here and available for questions? The real Thomas. I'm not the real Thomas. Yes, he's here.
There
I'm
he is.
here. I'm here.
Hey, Thomas.
Hey guys. Yeah, so we've got a few good questions. I'll just fire through them. Start off with this one from Matt. What are some of the most interesting trends you've been seeing in the data recently?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that kind of gets back to this theme that we've been following during this conversation of retention and usage in different protocols. I think we see a ton of aligned usage with very direct incentives, whether that's on Ethereum or Avalanche or another network. As soon as someone releases or tweets, an announcement about a liquidity mining program or some NFT that people start to pump, you all of a sudden see like very extreme usage directly associated with that. So I think one of the trends I'm seeing is that there isn't a lot of sustainable actions right now. And I don't know if that's because protocols are moving too fast and, not keeping up with the sort of timing the market and where users are in their journey, or if we just need to focus more on education. I sort of think that is more of the key, is like, how do we educate users to where like the technology is not going to slow down, and it really shouldn't, right? Like we're constantly progressing at a very rapid pace. And so while a lot of this complexity will be abstracted, I think it is really important for users to kind of understand the individual pieces that go into building like a composable financial system or something, right? Rather than just maybe chasing that next that ROI.
Okay, great. What is your analytical battle station, meaning hardware and software?
Yeah, my battle station hardware wise, I've got a nice ThinkPad laptop. I know most people are on Macs, but I do like the i7 here in this ThinkPad, and I've got two pretty large monitors. I'm definitely a guy that needs as many monitors as possible. I hope to upgrade soon in the future. I want to have a grid of 4 or something would be great.
Nice.
And then I've got for software, I would say our data stack is really a mix of using like NavyCat for database management, GitHub, for various scripts, Google Cloud Storage, Google Drive, for storing or processing pretty intense queries or scripts. And then, of course, Dune is a huge key there in deciphering a lot of that data, as well as Redash, which allows us to kind of cross-reference on-chain and off-chain data.
Okay, great. And I guess this is a question for both of you from Jackie. Is it possible to have real-time data? So far, it's half a day to 1 day delay.
Excuse me?
I'll let you take that one, Boxer.
Our database trails behind like a minute or two behind the head of the chain. That is due to data pipelines, and we have to decode all of that stuff. But in general, we're like we're not half a day behind. We're like 2 or 3 minutes behind, and we are working on bringing that number down even more in our new database architecture.
Yeah, I would say the answer I always tell people when they're viewing dashboards is that I believe the queries like automatically refresh every 2 to 3 hours, and then if you need real-time data, you can just click run, and it'll run it for you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, coming from a consumer perspective, it looks a bit different. So the way dashboards work on Dune is we can't rerun every query like every time somebody opens them. That would literally like make our data centers burn. So what we do is we kind of let the results go stale for, I think, 3 hours is the limit. And then if you open up a dashboard, then it will automatically refresh. So the oldest data you should ever see on Dune is pretty much 3 hours old. And then maybe like 2 or 3 minutes more until the dashboard has actually refreshed. You can kind of see that in the bottom right of the like a widget, so like one chart. There's you can always like click on that and see if it's currently running or when it has been last updated. And yeah, if you need live data in that moment, you can just make a free account on Dune, actually go into the query, press on run, wait until it's like finished executing, and then you're good to go.
Boxer, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
Part of this Q&A. I'm curious to learn more about the Dune engine V2 that you guys recently deployed. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. For my like technical understanding is not too deep, but I can explain the broad picture.
It'll work.
So the current state of the database is basically we have these PostgreSQL instances, and they have like with one Ethereum instance and with one Binance Smart Chain instance, one Polygon, and like it's just like Postgres is not made to like even like take these amount of data. Postgres is absolutely like at its edge, and it's actually like quite a wonder like it's quite a miracle that like Dune did today performs as well as it does. And that's that's like our infrastructure engineers are absolute geniuses. That's mostly, you can attribute that to them. And basically we've recognized that like Postgres is not like, we can't keep doing this in Postgres. So what we're now doing is kind of like switching to a Spark solution. So Spark is like kind of database technology. That whole thing like runs on another technology. I don't know how much I can share about that publicly. But basically like our whole database architecture will change. And then we will have all the different chains and all the different data sources in one kind of database. So you can do like native cross-chain querying. So that's going to be like, it's going to be freaking amazing. So you can do those user analysis, which you did kind of per chain. Now you can just like do that across all chains in one query. And it's going to be mental. It's going to be such an unlock for data in the space. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. And it's kind of, like we'll switch from like Postgres to a Spark system. That's like one big change. And then there's like a few, like the database will pretty much be the same, the contents of that. But there's a few like big implications which basically come from this change, and like all the data will be in one place. The execution will be faster. We'll kind of like, as the Dune community, will have to learn how to use this like Spark SQL thing, because it's a bit different. If you look at like Solana queries today, they're already like, there's a few things which are like slightly different, but in the end, like we're still using SQL. It's just like you have to like rethink a few things how you do them.
It's more, it'll probably require just more Googling.
Yeah,
more scrappiness.
Education from our side is very much needed, and we'll try to move a lot of the queries like kind of like programmatically, because there's like all like the same things will like there's a concept in PostgreSQL, and you can just like transfer that to Spark SQL, and so like we're not quite sure yet how we'll move the queries and how like that whole transition will go. But basically, like we'll slowly phase out the old system and like phase in the new system. And we hope that our users will just like naturally kind of accept the new system, just because it's so much better and faster.
So the goal of that, is to really increase like the execution speed, as well as handle a lot more traffic coming in. I can imagine that Dune is probably, getting a ton more users, than probably growing exponentially. So I'm sure you guys need that stronger engine.
We're certainly having a good time.
when can we analyze Dune data on Dune?
Somebody has actually built a dashboard. Shout out to I forgot. I don't know who it was anymore, but there's like a Dune meta kind of dashboard, which kind of analyzes how many contracts we are decoding and how many contracts are decoded in total. And it's
cool.
280,000. It is crazy. I mean, that like includes all the different factory contracts and stuff, but still like we've decoded 280K contracts. Like that's it's pretty mind blowing.
That's insane how many. Wow. Yeah, that's insane how many contracts just there are in general, and then how much there's demand for looking at the data on.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
Man, if I could have one Dune feature, it would be increase like organization of the queries themselves, and probably the schemas too. But like, if I could put folders, or put all my queries into folders and like different collections, that would be beautiful.
Yeah. I can definitely see that being useful, and kind of there's this tech system, but it's not really it's not working out too great. There's certainly some product design decisions to be made there to improve that experience. Any more questions, Thomas?
Yeah, we've got another one, quite an interesting one. What space in crypto for you is generating the most exciting data at the moment?
That's a really good question, actually. I think one of the areas I would like to see more data on, that I find really exciting, is DAO interactions. And it's probably not answering this question too directly, but it's more like I find that like a lot of the NFT data is very much the same. You could make one NFT dashboard, change the contract, and if it's ERC 721, it's pretty much the exact same dashboard for every single project. And the trends are typically the same too, right? You see huge spikes in the beginning, and then it kind of like fizzles out for most projects. DeFi data is really super interesting, right? I actually find it really exciting to watch like new protocols launch, add more markets, and then see how those markets kind of like compete against each other, and where the demand is. And so like a good example is like Synthetics Futures that just launched. They're constantly adding new markets, but you can also like analyze market conditions by looking at how many longs are being opened versus shorts or something, right? So I find that really exciting. And then back to the DAO thing, like I think there's a ton of data that's sort of sitting in like Discord right now, or Twitter, or Telegram, and I would love to see a lot of that data be surfaced. So I don't know if that ends up happening through something like Ceramic or some other means, but it would be really cool to be able to analyze what interactions are happening, who's contributing to DAOs, how much value are they creating for those DAOs.
Yeah, kind of combining off and on-chain data. That's a really, really interesting avenue. Maybe Mr. Elon, if you hear this, please give data.
Yes, if he purchases all blockchains, we'll be good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Elon Musk actually open sources the algorithm, maybe he'll also like give more access to the data and not care as much about like where that lands. And if we could have that data, like combine like how many times has this cash tag, I think people call it, where it's like if you do like $1 Bitcoin or something, that's a cash tag.
Right.
Like how many times has this been tweeted in an hour, and like how does the price develop? And especially for like these smaller, like for Bitcoin, will probably like not better. But for smaller coins, that will probably matter a lot. Where it's like this like weird Twitter marketing kind of engagement farming. I don't know. These things will probably be really relevant. So you could like analyze the like fuck Elon token on Binance Smart Chain by like their by Twitter mentions or something like that. I think that's really interesting. I really hope that there's a future where this is possible, but I highly doubt it. So yeah, we'll have to see.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Hopefully that data can be surfaced and isn't like too crowded by bots as well, because I know Twitter right now is just insane with the amount of things that I'm getting tagged in that are purely just scams.
Yeah.
What is your top Dune hack or tip?
I don't know if it's my top one, but it's essentially the ability to see other people's inputs in their queries, and leverage those, whether you're directly forking it or you're forking it to then break down and write in your own words, in order to understand the query. So like if you have a really complex output that you either need to understand for a contract you're under, or you're curious to understand and someone's done something similar, you can leverage the mistakes they've made, you can leverage the success that they've had to then like fully understand exactly what goes into every piece. So that's probably my number one Dune hack. I'd say if you're just getting started, start forking people's queries. I think it's the people, they're open, you can make them private, but for the most part I think everyone's really interested in sharing and kind of like learning and building in public.
Great. And I think that pretty much wraps it up for questions.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you, Chet. Maybe one more question from my side. What's kind of if you knew nothing about Dune today, and maybe you also don't have like an analytical background like you had, how would you start? So Web3 data analyst is quite a hot space for like approaching a career at the moment. So kind of what would you recommend them to do, what to like, where to start, how to find your first job or anything like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think from my experience, what's worked has been just diving right in and joining the various analytical communities, whether that's, Dune or something else. I think everyone is so willing to kind of put forth their help. Everyone's growing together and everyone's making mistakes together. And so like, if you have a problem, someone's probably figured it out before, or if they haven't, there might've been thought to it, putting two heads together is better than one in this space. And so, yeah, I would say dive right in, but do it with a project that you're interested in. Don't worry about getting paid on it. Don't worry about making it perfect. I think your goals are really learning how to manipulate data, blockchain data using SQL, and making sure you're getting the right outputs with your inputs. So find something you're interested in. It could be like an NFT project if that's what you want, and just try to build a couple queries off of it and go from there. Ask questions along the way. Yeah, that's how I got started. I pretty much just pinging Boxer like every 2 hours on, what does this mean? How the hell do I do this? And yeah, eventually you'll stop needing to ask so many questions. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, please, for anyone listening, don't do this today anymore. I can't. Like back then, it was all it was like 30 people in the Dune Discord, and now it's 10,000 or something. Please.
Luckily, the team's expanded quite a bit.
Save my DMs.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, this has been great, Trevor. Thanks so much for coming on. I'm actually Florian or Boxer, not Thomas. Thanks, Thomas, for handling the chat questions. And yeah, see you guys around. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.